Go love your own enemies. Don't be loving mine. My enemies are the theocratic fascists. I don't love them. I want to destroy them.
You're a child made in the image of God. Oh no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman.
So somebody by the name of Joy Yabara apparently is trying to trap people into, or get them into a position where I'm assuming this is a woman, can gently correct them as far as their perceptions of God, how wonderful and loving and kind God is. You just don't understand him. Yeah. You just need to talk to him and he'll explain everything. So she starts out. This is under my video, This God is Not Love. It's an older one, posted May 14th, 2013. She writes, has anyone here read the whole entire Bible? I wrote back, of course. That's a big reason why I'm an atheist now. She writes, what did you read in the Bible that caused you to become an atheist? I wrote, I have to warn you, my answers are quite a bit longer than her comments. But that's typical of me. Well, knowing ahead of time the Bible is fiction had a great deal to do with it. But when I tried to overlook that little bit of knowledge and read the Bible objectively, just seeing the God character without the filters Christianity throws over your eyes, I saw a monster, a brutal, vain brat who needs unending ego stroking, and if he doesn't get it, he throws very destructive tantrums that results in atrocity after atrocity committed against humankind. And then, of course, there's the verse where this monster orders pregnant women cut open with swords, and then other verse that commands women rape victims must marry their rapists. Oh, and then there's that bit where God floods the entire planet to punish creations he regrets creating. Darn it. Why did I do that? I'm just going to kill everybody. Yeah. Okay, so now my mouse doesn't want to work. Okay. I could seriously make a very long list, but perhaps you get the picture. The point is, even if this wasn't a fictional character, this would not be a God I would ever, in a million trillion years, ever want to bow my knee to. So Joy writes, I'm sorry you see such a horrible God, but he's not. I'm sure you could give me a list, but have you ever asked him to explain why there are certain things in the Bible or why he allows certain things to happen? The God you described is not the one I serve. I'll just use the flood story, for example. There's a lot more to that story. Then she writes, what do you find negative in the New Testament? Okay, so I have two very long responses. One of them is really long. I actually took bits from the Thinking Atheist website to answer the second question. But, okay, so my answer to her first question, which was, maybe you should talk to him and ask him to explain why there are things in the Bible or why he allows things to happen. Okay, I wrote, are you seriously saying this to an atheist? Just talk to God? Seriously? Tell you what, you have a conversation with Santa Claus first and ask him why he doesn't bring you presents anymore. You should get some kind of reply, since Santa does exist, and I know he does because he tells me so. After he tells you he doesn't bring you presents anymore because his rule book says he can only deliver to people under 3 feet tall. Yes, some very small adults still receive gifts from Santa. Let me know, and then I'll have a chat with your God, pretending he exists, since apparently you think so, and I guess that must mean he, she, it does. Making excuses for the vile crimes against humanity God does in the Bible. Seriously? Are you saying there is any excuse for such horrific deeds? Justification? And even if there is, which there is not, how can you possibly know the mind of the creator of the universe? You can't. The fact there is no excuse for atrocity and genocide, the fact is there is no excuse for atrocity and genocide and infanticide, period. If Hitler gave you a very good answer for why he slaughtered the Jews, would you accept him as a good guy and agree to go drink beers with him? See, I would not. Nothing Hitler could possibly say would make him remotely a good person in my eyes. Now your baby-killing monster you seem to think so highly of, 1,000 times worse than Hitler. Take Stalin, Hitler, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, every tyrant and every serial killer on the planet, and combine them together. Your God is worse by far. So no, I do not look for justifications or excuses for why your God is a fucking monster. Or would be if he, she, it existed, which he, she, it does not, and you talking to me as if he, she, it does, without bothering to lift a finger to present your testable, verifiable evidence that he, she, it does, is absurd. I am an atheist. It is utterly absurd to presume to talk to an atheist about an imaginary fictional character when you know that person does not believe in it. Shall I talk to you about how Lord Sauron from Lord of the Rings is justified for his many crimes against innocents, ignoring completely the fact that you very likely don't believe Lord Sauron exists? That would be silly and rude of me now, wouldn't it? Want to talk up how wonderful and loving and caring and merciful your fucking God is? You need to first convince the atheist he, she, it exists. You know, do the work. If you don't have the evidence, and you don't because there isn't any, then don't presume to assume this thing's existence is a given when it is not. Okay, and then I responded to her, what do you find negative in the Old Testament? This is the long part. Okay, we'll try to read it in a clever way so it's not really super boring. Okay. I see. So let's push the baby-killing butcher God from the Old Testament under the rug and focus on the New Testament God instead. The God who is unchanging according to the Bible, who does an about-face in the New Testament and suddenly becomes all warm and fuzzy. Jesus is supposedly God in the flesh. So that means Jesus is carrying the guilt of all the crimes he committed in the Old Testament around with him. He is guilty of murder and rape and giving commands to murder and rape. But aside from all that, it is irrelevant because even more than the Old Testament, the New Testament is fiction. At least the Old Testament is based on myth and legend, and those tend to be based on some true event that happened sometime. That was exaggerated, like maybe Noah was a farmer whose fields got flooded and he saved some drowning rabbits by tossing them into his rowboat. But the New Testament, if you bother to read about its inception, pure fiction. Nothing but fiction. Likely not a thing depicted in the New Testament actually happened. Likely very few characters other than Paul and a scattering of Romans actually lived. But I digress. You could find all this out if you bothered researching the origins of the Christian cult and the origins of the Bible. And I mean researching beyond what you'd find at your local Christian bookstore. What is negative about the New Testament? Well, the fact it is a lie, for one thing. The fact that it invents sin and tells children they are born guilty, carrying guilt for sins their parents and grandparents and so on committed, all the way back to the bullshit Adam and Eve story. What kind of justice is it to blame children for something they did not do and had no way to control what happened before they were even born? But that is the stupidity and malice of this cult, teaching children they are broken and deserved to be tortured forever if they don't follow the fucking cult. Need more negatives from the New Testament? It's a long list and only some of the many examples, and this is where I get the information from the Thinking Atheist. I am going to try to read as many as I can before I fall over dead. From reading more evidence from the New Testament? It's a long list and only some of the many examples. Matthew 8:12. Jesus warned of eternal torture in hell, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 10:35 through 36. Following Jesus meant the possibility of turning a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, etc. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Matthew 11:21 through 24. The cities of Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum were not impressed with Jesus' great works. So Jesus said, "Woe to you," and cursed them to a fate more unbearable than that of Sodom. Matthew 8:21. A man sought to follow Jesus, but he wanted to bury his recently deceased father before he went. Jesus replied, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Jesus ignored the man's grief. Mark 4:10. In Jesus' parable of the sower, he told his disciples that he spoke to others in parables so they'd remain confused. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven. Mark 7:10. Jesus taught that any child who cursed his parents should be killed, according to the Old Testament. Luke 8:32 through 33. Jesus cast demons out of a naked man and into a large herd of pigs. They fell over a cliff to their death. The town asked Jesus to leave. Luke 12:47. Jesus warned that a servant of God who does not heed his master will be beaten with many blows. Luke 19:26. In the parable of the 10 minas, the master, God, said of those who chose not to follow him, "Bring them here and kill them in front of me." John 6:53 through 66. Jesus said to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Despite the metaphorical tone, many disciples were uncomfortable with the idea and chose to walk away. Acts 5:1 through 9. Ananias lied about the money he made on sold property, keeping some for himself. God killed him and then killed his wife for being in on it. Romans 1:26 through 27. Paul said that homosexuals deserve death. Ephesians 1:4 through 5. Despite all of Jesus' instructions to accept him as Savior, Jesus also says God predestined those will be saved according to his pleasure. I'm going to repeat that again because this is an important verse. Ephesians 1:4 through 5. Despite all of Jesus' instructions to accept him as Savior, Jesus also says God predestined those will be saved according to his pleasure. Yeah, so much for free will. This goes along with what I have a problem with, the fact that an all-knowing God who can see the future would know before we were even born which of us are going to heaven and which of us are going to hell. I didn't realize there was an actual verse that said that. Now I do. Hebrews 12, verse 20. God said that animals must be stoned to death if they lay foot upon Mount Zion. Stoned to death. Somebody, listening to this video should read up on how painfully slow and agonizing it is to be stoned to death. Do you think any animal deserves that for stepping on a fucking mountain? Like he or she would actually know the rules? Oh yeah, we're just going to stone the animal to death. Wouldn't it be better, if it's okay, the animal can't possibly know the rules, so how would they know that it's wrong? They step on the mountain. Wouldn't it be a little more humane to just slit its throat, or hit it with a club? No, we're going to stone it to death. It's going to die in agony for something that it doesn't even have any way of knowing is wrong. Yeah, that's the wonderful Christian God. Okay, the last one. Oh no, it's the second to the last one. 1 Peter 1 through 20. Despite God's failed experiment in the Garden of Eden, the mass execution of Noah's flood, and the final solution of Christ's sacrifice, Jesus was predestined to be crucified all along. He was chosen before the creation of the world. So, what was the point of all those people drowning to death? And last one, Revelation 6, verse 8. In the end times, God gives death permission to slaughter 25% of the earth's population by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. So, in the very last chapter of the New Testament, God goes back to being a major asshole, because that's what he is. And he's pretty much an asshole through the whole Bible. But he's loving and merciful and just. So yeah, that was my response to this girl, to her question. What is negative about the New Testament? I should just talk to God. I should just pray. I should just pray and ask him to explain all these things, because I'm sure there's a good explanation. I'm sorry, but if this thing did exist, there's no justification for its crimes that it committed. If these crimes actually happened, which I don't believe they did, because I don't believe anything in the Bible is really true, and I don't believe this thing really exists. But if it did exist, why would anybody praise it? Why? It would be like it would be like, oh my gosh, our lives it would be a horrible existence to have this thing looming over us with his fist clenched, threatening to punish us horribly just for being human and flawed and creatures of the natural world. Yeah. So, yes, I have read the whole Bible. It is the Bible that caused me to become an atheist. It was the final nail in the coffin. Finding out, reading the things that I read about how the Bible was put together and how the cult came to be, and the very fact that the historicized Jesus wasn't even around when the first Christians were walking around on the earth. He wasn't invented. The earliest Christians knew nothing of a physical Jesus. Theirs was a Jesus that lived in the spirit world. All these things. Pretty much had decided it was a bunch of bullshit. But then reading the Bible for the first time with objectivity instead of through the God glasses I had on for so long, I saw it for what it was, and it was indeed the last final nail in the coffin. It's like, I knew it was fiction, but when I read the Bible and I saw the God for what it was, I realized even if it wasn't fiction, even if this thing really lived, it existed, it's a fucking monster. Why would I ever praise it or agree with it? Or worship it? I'd be, I have a hard time believing that people can be so blind. But like I said in an earlier video, the longer I'm away from the cult, the harder it is for me to remember what it's like to be under the spell. I think the longer I become an atheist, the longer I am an atheist, the less understanding and sympathy I feel. I had it at the start because I knew what it felt like to be deluded and be under the spell. I'm losing the memory of what it's like. Now I just feel impatience. I feel like, how can people believe this? How can they condone this God and the actions of this God and support him? And yay, God's wonderful, God's loving, God cares, God's merciful, God is just. Really? Have you fucking read? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you probably have read the Bible or little bits of it that your church wants you to read. But you read it with you presume these things the church wants you to presume. Oh, God is so wise. Everything God does is good. There's reason behind. There's a secret reason why he does what he does. Even when he's, ordering pregnant women cut open with swords, there's a secret, holy, special, mystical reason. And it's a good reason. So we should praise him. Yay! Oh, but abortion is wrong. Yeah, abortion's wrong. God doesn't like abortion. Okay, this is getting too long, this video. I just had to, I had to share because, again, this person's comments brought out stuff that I just had to share. So anyway, if you had to end this with this lady wrote me again after I had listed all that. Okay, I read everything you said, and I know for a fact that you don't understand the God that I serve. You're taking every single verse out of context, and some of the stuff you said isn't true. Almost every single parable that Jesus taught is explaining that people who don't accept him into their heart will go to hell. Yes, that's awful, beyond awful. That's why I, as a follower of Christ, am warning people. John 3:16. Say it with me now, boys and girls. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Yeah. And, I'm sorry, but, okay, we're not going to interject. We have all sinned. That's why he died for us. As all we have to do is accept his free gift of grace. Yeah, we all have sinned. All that we have to do is accept his free gift of grace. That's what it feels like. It feels like a stupid doll. I am a follower of Christ, and I am warning people. Yes, that's awful beyond awful that people are going to go to hell, but I will praise the God that will be torturing you forever for not being able to believe. Yeah, because he's good. Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't going to interject. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so we all have sin. That's why he died for us. So all we have to do is accept his free gift of grace. It's really free. You just have to give up your whole life. Yeah. I know that if you asked him, then diligently searched, he would give you wisdom in what all those verses and stories you mentioned really mean, because I don't want to give you that. I don't want to have to do the research of trying to figure out what those verses really mean. I'm just going to assume that they're good because they're in the Bible and my church says they're good. Oh, but your verses are out of context. Mine aren't, but yours are. And oh, okay. I'm just a girl. I don't have the power to explain, but he does. And God is love, no matter what anyone says. Okay, so I need to be a little less harsh. She's just a girl. I'm assuming that means she's not very old. But she can't be very young because she uses pretty big words. She can't be a child. She writes better than many adults I've seen. I wrote a rather harsh response, though. There's no such thing as your stupid God. And I'm sorry, but I am tired of dealing with deluded blind people. Have fun with your little imaginary baby killing friend. I answered your question. Huge waste of time as it was. I'm all done. Thank you for showing zero respect for me in my 35 plus years as a Christian by telling me I don't understand the God you serve. Yes, actually I do. Delusion has a funny way of warping one's perceptions. It's true. I used to say all these things. I used to think all these things. Oh, it's really horrible that God's going to send people to hell, but you know, that's why I'm out there trying to save people. Yeah, that's why I'm trying to tell all the people that they're so wrong and lost and blind if they don't believe what I do, because I'm trying to save them from my God. Yeah, it's like, you know, if you have an abusive father and you're trying to save your sibling from the father's abuse, so you know you're trying to push the sibling out of the way of your father's fists. That's basically what you're doing. You're trying to save people from the wrath of your God, your fucking bully God, who threatens to beat up and hurt and torment people who don't toe the line and believe the way they're supposed to, according to this book. Okay, so this video has two endings, but it's really sad. This whole thing is just really sad. I'm sure this is a very nice person. You know, I get tired. I lose perception. I get tired. I get cranky. I have lost my patience with this whole thing. You know, I guess I'm getting angrier as I get further away from being able to understand how people can believe this and think this way. So again, if you've been watching, thanks. Bye.